we still have about 10, 15 minutes. So if, okay, I saw my colleague, Martin Rose, start.
Yeah, you mentioned the fact that Taiwan is an important global economic player, and you had some statistics on economic relations between Taiwan and China. My question to you is, though, to what extent is the critical role of Taiwan as a kind of, I guess, mediating place for high-tech transfers of production in global production chains, how does that feed into Taiwanese-China political relations? There's been such massive Taiwanese investment in the mainland. Has that shaped the current state of the current situation of peaceful coexistence, if you can call it that, or is it somehow something that's just happened alongside other kinds of relationships between the two countries?
So, because we're in a school of international affairs, right, it is important to mention theory more than once. So I mentioned the realist school of thought in IR theory, which sort of, looks at these things as a matter of power and national interest. But certainly there is a lot in the relationship between Taiwan and the PRC that activates our instincts as IR liberals, and that asks us to consider to what extent does all of this economic activity back and forth shape a more peaceful and cooperative environment between the two sides. And I think it has been very important in conveying to PRC officials and PRC citizens a couple of things. One is, I think many people in mainland China fully understand and appreciate how much benefit they have derived economically from their interactions with Taiwan. Actually, I co-authored something several years ago, and my co-author interviewed an official at the Taiwan Affairs Office in Beijing who said, if it were not for the Taiwanese investors after 1989, so after June 4th, 1989, when the rest of the world withdrew its investment to sanction China because of the Tiananmen incident, had it not been for the Taiwanese rushing back in to fill that void, our economy would not have revived. We would not have been able to get back on the trajectory we were on before. Also, remember, who came to the U.S. in 1990 to, well, he didn't actually literally come, but he sent his people to the U.S. to lobby for most favored nation or permanent normal trading relations status for China? Taiwanese President Lee Teng-hui. So Taiwan has been directly a huge factor in the PRC's economic growth and development, and it has also been a continual advocate for global engagement with China. So I think many people in China understand that. And most importantly, people understand that at the local level, where the Taiwan money actually makes a huge difference in terms of employment and other kinds of activity. The other thing I think a lot of Chinese officials and Chinese citizens believe is that they are, while when they think about the U.S., they're definitely IR realists. When they think about Taiwan, they tend to be IR liberals. And they believe that all of this cross-strait economic interaction and engagement and intertwinement is going to ultimately produce an outcome where Taiwanese accept political unification. And they don't know how long it's going to take. There are lots of debates within mainland China circles about how long they should wait and whether this is working or not. But I think that they have accepted, perhaps out of necessity, the position that this is bringing the two sides together, and so we can afford to be patient as long as the economics proceed in this direction.
Okay, we go. Hi, my name is Jefferson. I'm actually from Taiwan. So on behalf of the Taiwanese government, I would like to thank you for this very informative speech. So my question is that how could we actually bring more attention on Taiwan, because we've been treated unfairly in every aspect internationally. And the reason that I ask the question is pretty much I know a lot of Taiwanese, including myself, are very frustrated and how do I say pessimistic about the future, because Well, because we all know that Chinese could be very stubborn. For example, my personal experience is that my peer, one of my peers who is from China, he actually came to me, like approached me, I think the first day at school, and introduced himself, saying that he's from China, and he know that a lot of Taiwanese doesn't recognize themselves as Chinese, but we'll see in the future. And he actually repeat that in 3 times. I mean, that is very offensive in our perspective. So we're not very optimistic about the future, and so that's pretty much why my question: how are we going to bring more attention on this? Because Taiwan has been a synonym of the international adjustment. I mean, in our perspective. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Well, the question is, how can Taiwan bring more attention to itself? And I think, actually, when if you look at it, and part of what caused me to want to write this book is so many people ask me, what is it about Taiwan? It's this little teeny country. It's the size of Denmark physically, the population the size of Ghana, but it's either on the front page of the news section or it's on the front page of the business section more than the other 20 countries of its size put together. So in a sense, Taiwan does get a lot of attention, and I think it gets a lot of attention because of its accomplishments, right? Because of economic accomplishments, because of democratization, but also because Taiwanese have this willingness to show their hearts, which I think is unusual in the world. Not their anger, right? Right. Shakespeare, they always talked about anger. I think starts in your liver. Maybe this is Chinese medicine, not Shakespeare. But so anger is one thing, and I think for a lot of PRC Chinese, this issue activates angry feelings. We are feeling so frustrated that our national destiny cannot be fulfilled. So we're angry at Taiwan for not accepting its role as an agent of our national destiny, but we're really mad at the Americans for not allowing us to achieve our national destiny. So, but I think that kind of discourse is not easy for others to hear. Angry speech is always difficult for anyone to take in. And I think why Taiwan has been more successful is that Taiwanese tend to speak from their heart about the life they have. And I frequently at events like this, Taiwanese people get mad at me and they say, "Why aren't you doing more to save us?" And then I don't like that either, right? Like the liver thing. It just doesn't win you friends and influencing people. But I think also the reasonableness of many Taiwanese who say, look, we know we can't have everything we want. So 62% say, if we could have independence, if we could just sign the divorce papers and get it over with already, that would be great. But you know what? We're not going to be that troublemaker in the world. We're not going to demand everything. We will accept a much reduced portion of what we want in order to be realistic. And I think that also, that kind of reasonableness has won Taiwan friends. So, I think the way that you do it is honestly by making videos about, Santais dancing with, kids in a slum in Nairobi. That is so much more powerful than 50 Taiwan independence websites that, just yell at me.
Okay, well, I see a lot of hands. So for to save time, we take quite a few questions.
Okay.
Then she can decide which one she wants to answer. To really to be brief. So we start from this side. So you can start.
Yeah, you mentioned the role of Taiwanese democratization as a kind of lesson for the rest of the world, and it's quite interesting that Taiwan did it in a very gradual way, and first from an hegemonic party to a dominant party system to the current system that they have now. Could you speak a little more about this issue?
Sure. Okay, hold on. Okay, David.
Yes, ma'am. I was just want to get your take on the strategic relationships between Taiwan and Korea's, Taiwan and Japan, Taiwan and Saudi.
Okay, here. Where from?
I just had a question about whether or not there's signs of Chinese acceptance of Taiwan independence. For example, Taiwan hosted the 2010 Model UN World Conference. They have observer status in the World Health Organization now currently, and some countries have offered to switch diplomatic relations from Taiwan to China like El Salvador, and China said no thank you, you can keep recognizing Taiwan. So,
okay, I see that hand's never put down, so go ahead.
My question is, in terms of the election next year in Taiwan, what's your opinion about which party will win? And Minjin that win, do you think the strategy of mainland China toward Taiwan will change, and how will it change?
Okay, here. Hope you remember. Go ahead.
If you can, you provided a lot of information that basically makes me think that we'll be in this dance, this status quo dance for a long time. And I'm kind of curious if you were to speculate on the contingencies upon which we would go in one direction, the relationship would go in one direction or another. What would that world look like? Like, what would have to happen for unification, or what would have to happen for a formal divorce?
Okay, let me take two more here.
If you could just say a word about the sale of the F-16 jets, why that seems to be so controversial.
And then I wanted to bring up the General Report 1, and that a few years ago there was a court case in the Federal District Court about declaring Taiwan a protectorate of the U.S. And that whole shebang, what your opinion on that is?
Okay, I think we have more than you can remember. And
let me take some of these on the strategic question. On your question about sort of the legal status of Taiwan, I don't think this is going to sound absolutely terrible, but I don't think the law matters here. This is a political question. So, let's see, the question about Taiwan's strategic relationships with neighboring countries and also on the F-16s. I think the reason, because it's a political question and the legal niceties of it are understood differently depending upon the assumptions that a particular actor brings, it's very hard to imagine it being resolved legally without first being resolved politically. So that means that Taiwan is forced then to kind of simultaneously work on two tracks. And actually, I was just this morning reading an article. Why? It was an article published in your very own journal in the March 2011 issue of the American Journal of Chinese Studies, call on Ma Ying-jeou's new grand strategy. And according to this article, the current president of Taiwan, who is running for re-election in January, is trying to kind of move Taiwan away from a balancing strategy dependent mainly on strong alliances with the U.S., but also good partnerships with other U.S. allies, and military preparation toward a strategy that is more about accommodating the PRC as much as possible. And I think in the end, what the author decides on, who was Zhang Baohui settles on, is that there's a little bit of a hedging strategy going on there. So primarily Ma's policy for the last almost 4 years has been to really try to use diplomacy and good economic relations to secure a peaceful and stable environment in the Taiwan Strait in order to prolong as long as possible this dance, so that we don't have to confront a decision point anytime soon. But at the same time, Ma has continued to cultivate the sort of strategic realist sides of, or the balancing side of the grand strategy. So I think it's less a matter of abandoning internal and external balancing, so alliances and military preparations, as it is sort of bringing up this other side. So I'm picturing, right, the soundboard, and the volume on balancing was really loud. I think he may have brought that volume down a little bit, but he's really pulled up the volume on accommodation and diplomatic and economic progress. But Taiwan is in a very difficult and scary military situation, right? The Chinese military capabilities are increasing rapidly, and China has made while on the political side, sort of the analog to Ma's accommodation strategy, we also see definitely evidence that on the political and diplomatic side, the PRC is trying to be more relaxed toward Taiwan. The Model UN example is one that I didn't know about, but that's another good sort of data point for suggesting that the PRC is, in fact, trying to answer Ma's accommodation with their own accommodation. But they, too, are hedging. So on the military side, we see almost no evidence that the PRC's military threat to Taiwan is leveling off. Instead, it steadily increases. So Taiwan is still doing this kind of internal and external balancing. So coming to the U.S. for F-16CDs and other weapons packages, both for their military utility and also for the political signal that they send that the U.S. is a friend of Taiwan and will continue to support Taiwan militarily. On the specifics of Japan and Korea, I think the short answer is they freeload on the U.S. The U.S. carries the water for everybody in the region on this issue. They have interests at stake, especially Japan has big interests at stake, but they do not want to deal with this issue, so they don't. On the arms sales, the U.S., I think, decision was really kind of trying to split the difference and to give Taiwan a militarily significant and capable system, which was the F-16 upgrade, while at the same time not going the full extent to antagonize the PRC. So I don't think that, some people have suggested that the Obama administration is kind of taking its marching orders from Beijing on that arms sales. I actually think the arms that the systems that they got are pretty capable and will make a difference in the military balance. But it's not everything that the Taiwanese military would have wanted. I think that's everybody except the question about democratization. And are we seriously out of time now?
Yeah. A few more minutes. Yeah.
Okay, because I was the flip answer to your question is my first book is on democracy. Not available here, but probably available from Amazon.com. But I think there were a lot of countries that underwent a similar kind of transition to Taiwan's in the 80s and 90s. And some of them have done really well. I think South Korea's democracy is consolidated well. Some of them have not done as well. One of the comparisons that we frequently make is Taiwan and Mexico, the hegemonic party to the dominant party to competitive parties. I think overall, for interesting and complex reasons, Taiwan has probably done a little better than Mexico in consolidating its democracy and managing the transition in the long term. I think a critical factor for all of those countries that I just mentioned, and for some others also, was the fact that democratization was kind of a bottom-up. The decision to allow major changes happened at the top, but the practice of democracy began with local elections, or with an electoral process, not so much local elections in Korea, but that elections were part of the process by which these countries, including Taiwan, learned to do democracy, and when their economies and societies kind of caught up to their constitutions, it became increasingly difficult for those hegemonic parties to say, I know the Constitution says we're supposed to be democratic top to bottom, but we're not ready for that yet. And the societies made the case, no, we're ready now. And so to me, the existence of a democratic process for grassroots management in Taiwan is critical to democratization sort of filtering its way up.
Okay, one more. Okay.
I was just wondering if how this Taiwan issue sort of factors into Chinese concern about its own domestic stability, and whether you think the sort of increased concern that China has about domestic stability is likely to exacerbate relations with Taiwan, or maybe take attention away from that.
Very interesting question. How does Taiwan factor into China's anxiety or concern about domestic stability? The big fear, and this is another piece of the answer to your question, the big fear is the Falklands. That the Chinese government will be facing some kind of internal domestic crisis and will use a sort of nationalistic rampage against Taiwan to reconsolidate its domestic support. This is what the Argentine government did when it invaded the Falklands. That, I think, is a possibility, and I think that's why you also see, this is so interesting to me, Taiwanese constantly encouraging people in other countries not to cheer against China, right? Instability in China, you constantly hear Taiwanese say, is not good for us. Conflict between the US and China is not good for Taiwan, because what we don't want to happen is the PRC leadership to decide the only way to prove their bona fides, or however you say that, to their own people is to go out and show how macho they can be by, unleashing a can of stuff on Taiwan. So that's like one fear and one possibility. But I think, actually, the more persuasive line of argument is that the PRC understands perfectly well that the PRC leadership understands perfectly well that a bad attempt or even a bad success in bringing Taiwan into the PRC, so some kind of annexationist gesture, not only, well, it's very costly, and what have you just eaten? There's a reason why nobody eats a porcupine. Because even if you manage to swallow it, you will be sorry. And I think Taiwan, so long as public opinion is as it is a porcupine in the stomach of the PRC. But it's also a porcupine not only because, it's 23 million grouchy people wishing that you hadn't just done that, but it's also a porcupine in terms of the rest of China. If you look at Hong Kong, people often ask, what's the Hong Kong story tell us about Taiwan? And there are lots of ways to answer that question, but the way I want to answer that question right now is Hong Kong, little teeny Hong Kong, has been incredibly indigestible for the PRC as a political presence within the nation. One of my students came in the other day and said, Dr. Rieger, I thought that Hong Kong was part of China, but all the human rights organizations have offices in Hong Kong. How is that allowed? I think that's an excellent question. And what is the effect of all those human rights organizations having offices? What is the effect of all of this free press and political activism in Hong Kong? Well, right now it can be dismissed as, we're just leaving them alone for their 50 years, which you've got 35 left, and then, so don't worry about it. But a whole province of 23 million people exemplifying every day the ability of ethnic Chinese to live a democratic life. I don't know how the PRC explains the continued dictatorship of the Communist Party to the other 1.3 billion Chinese under those circumstances. So I think there are lots of reasons of domestic stability that suggest that patience, forbearance, and taking the long view is the way to go if you're China.
Okay, I hope you are convinced how good the book is from this talk, and you are going to purchase the book. Our next event will be tomorrow. We have a group of scholars from China to talk about Tibetan issue. Tomorrow is not a presentation because I don't want them to go presentation. We have a conversation. So if you come to our program, please prepare to bring questions, to have a conversation with people from China. Then on November 16th, we have Town Hall. That one we have a live broadcast from New York City, have Dr. Brinsky talk about China-U.S. relations. Our local speaker will be, at this time, potentially an official from a State Department in charge of Chinese affairs. Because of the current government official, his travel schedule is not fixed, so we are not 100% sure the person can come. We're still working with New York City. So please mark your calendars, and if you are able to come. Once again, please join me to thank Professor Shelley for such a wonderful